what are some ways in which our time in the womb determines who we are? My mother was very anxious, I'm sure, while I was pregnant, and I'm wondering if that has had any effects on my anxiety to this day.
It didn't cause it, but it made it statistically more likely. There's this misattribution that environment begins at birth. No, it doesn't. You just had 9 very intimate months of shared environment with your mother, sharing some of the same sensory information. The diaphragm turns out to be, when your mother is talking, turns out to be a wonderfully resonant thing to translate that into sound waves inside a womb. Smells get in there indirectly. And most of all, you're getting mom's blood and whatever is in the blood. So if mom is very, very stressed, your brain will be exposed to more stress hormones. If mom is exposed to, excessive amounts of alcohol, like any, it will translate into alcohol getting into your fetal brain. Fetal environment has all sorts of influences because that's kind of when you're starting this construction project on the brain. So as but one example of that, if your mother was immensely stressed during pregnancy, like homeless or refugee or who knows what, she will have been secreting elevated levels of this one class of stress hormones called glucocorticoids. And as a result, your fetal brain would have been marinating in excessive levels of glucocorticoids. And one of the results of that is there's a permanent change in your brain, what would be called an epigenetic programming change, such that a part of your brain called the amygdala is going to be bigger than average when you're an adult. And we know exactly how that works and what genes are turned on and which ones are turned off, and it's clear in all of that. So you now, as an adult, have a bigger amygdala. What's that going to mean? You're going to perceive threats that other people don't. You are going to feel anxiety in circumstances that other people don't. People with an array of anxiety disorders wind up having an expanded amygdala. All of that, you are now more prone towards that. And what's really amazing is if, as a result of this, you now have elevated glucocorticoid levels, your amygdala is hyperreactive, elevated glucocorticoid levels when you're an adult. If you're a woman, when you're pregnant, your fetus is going to be exposed to elevated glucocorticoid levels. And thus, they're going to be born with a somewhat enlarged amygdala. And as an adult, they're going to pass that trait on to their child, who are going to have a little bit larger than normal amygdala. And what you see is a multi-generational ripple that could be passed on. And this has nothing to do with genes.
Do people with expanded amygdalae prefer horror movies?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure.
I think because I could go either way. Maybe they'd love them or maybe they'd absolutely hate them, but I imagine they would have a more sensitive response to them than the neurotypical amygdala having person.
That you're right, but I can't guess in what direction. One thing I do feel certain about is they're much more likely to have gotten into a fist fight with the person filling up their popcorn dispenser about how the person didn't put enough in, because they would see provocation. What? You're not giving me enough? What? You looking for trouble here? Says your enlarged amygdala.
Are you familiar with the neuroscientist / psychologist Joseph Ledoux at NYU?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, he's in a band called the Amygdaloids.
Yes,
you didn't know that.
He's great. He's a good musician. I've heard him play. He always plays at neuroscience conferences.